Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. This week, a very special guest, Lyn Ulbricht. Her son, Ross Ulbricht, is spending 2 life sentences plus 40 years for a nonviolent crime, and you and I have to figure out a way to get him out. Check it out. Lyn Ulbricht, welcome. We've been talking about doing this, I think, for several years, and it's really an honor to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So let's assume that a lot of people don't know about you or your son, Ross, and let's give them a sense for what happened to him and why he's in prison today.
Sure. Yeah, my son Ross is serving double life plus 40 years without the possibility of parole in a maximum security prison for all nonviolent charges, first-time offender, no history of violence whatsoever. And it's essentially for his role in the Silk Road website / marketplace, something he created on a computer when he was 26 years old. And I feel that it is an excessive, cruel sentence that is totally unnecessary. Ross is completely peaceful. He's not a danger to anyone. And I'm working very hard to have him free and to have this sentence, which sets a terrible precedent, by the way, commuted.
And how long has he been in prison?
He'll be starting his 7th year in a couple of weeks.
Okay. So let's take a step back, and I know this whole story, and it gets pretty complicated.
Yeah, it's complicated.
But let's talk about Silk Road first, because
Sure.
this was this the first sort of encrypted deep web marketplace, or where there was
Good question.
What's the story? I don't.
Actually, I think there were some before.
Yeah.
I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Certainly, Ross had never done anything like that. The thing is, Ross got very passionate about liberty and free markets, and then the potential for monetary freedom through Bitcoin, which was very new. Hardly anyone had heard of it. And he was at Penn State. He was part of the Ron Paul campaign. He brought Ron Paul to Penn State. He campaigned for him and became very kind of on fire for freedom.
Yeah.
And he created a video game to give people the experience of a real free market. And he tried to get it published. He talked to people, but it didn't happen. And he turned to the internet and he created Silk Road. Now, Silk Road was based on the non-aggression principle of voluntary interaction. So it wasn't a totally free market because certain things were prohibited. Anything that basically hurt a third party created a victim. So, for instance, there was no child pornography or anything related to pedophilia allowed, no stolen property, no weapons, no assassinations, things that could be used to hurt a third party. Drugs were allowed because the administration of the site felt it was a free choice between 2 individuals. Carnegie Mellon did a study. The overwhelming type of drugs that were exchanged were user amounts of cannabis. But there were other drugs on there. And I'm not defending that.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that's what, yeah.
But that would be.
It wasn't the intention to be
Yeah.
a drug site. The intention was to be a free market that was private, uninterfered with by the government, that used Bitcoin as a means of exchange.
So kind of like an encrypted, anonymous version of Amazon.
Yeah, or eBay or something like that.
So
yeah.
you wouldn't get dogged on Facebook for every time you searched for
Right.
something on Amazon.
Yeah.
Which
Well,
sounds
good
pretty
point.
attractive
Yeah.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he was. I think he was wasn't he a member of Students for Liberty?
Yeah, he was actually he was one of the first members, and his signature is on their first T-shirt that's hanging on the wall of their office in D.C.
Yeah.
So they.
So
sent
he's very
that to
motivated
me.
by
yeah.
ideas and this sort of like, I mean, it's almost this. It almost sounds like Galt's Gulch to me, where everyone's going to trade value for value and
yeah, he was an idealist.
Yeah.
And he got into Austrian economics and von Mises and all that philosophy. And yeah, that's what he became very consumed with, and chose not to go on to his PhD in physics. He had a free ride to Cornell and said, well, that's just not my passion. Of course, as a mother, I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, no. But,
By the way,
I didn't know what he was doing.
Those same idea guys screwed up my life as well, so... so I'm not nearly as productive as I otherwise could have been.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's good to be an idealist, but, when you're 26 years old, you're not that realistic.
Yeah.
He's very remorseful about what happened. He's like, oh, my God, I can't believe, the mistakes that he made.
Yeah.
It's not like he would ever do it again. He's very remorseful. But he did create the site.
Yeah. Now these, part of the technologies, part of the core of this is Tor, which is a government-based, basically private way to keep your stuff private.
Right.
I'm not a technologist, so I'm not going to show my ignorance by trying to explain it any more than that. But,
and you won't ask me to either,
yeah,
right?
No.
But it's used by dissidents and journalists, and lots of people who want privacy. It's not necessarily a criminal thing. Yeah.
Yeah, privacy is not a criminal thing.
Yeah.
And the presumption and we almost all of the shows that I do, no matter what we're talking about, we just did a show, I guess it's running today, about Kamala Harris, and she has wanted to hold people like Facebook accountable for everything that's said on Facebook. And so if something criminal,
very familiar.
If something criminal happens, and imagine you would break the internet, you would destroy it, you would destroy free speech, you would certainly destroy privacy. But there is this constant tension between government agents who want to control people's lives and manipulate what they can and can't do, and the internet, which and innovation and people. It will be free.
Right.
It will happen. People will find ways to do the things that they want to do.
Right. Well, that's essentially what the point is with the whole situation with Ross, is that he's being held accountable and responsible for everything that happened on a site that he was not controlling it.
Right.
I mean, they did monitor it for those things that created victims, but they wasn't controlling it. And it's if it were a civil case, they wouldn't do that because there's a law where you cannot hold a website host accountable for what's said or done on the site. But because it was a criminal case, that's not covered. But it's exactly the same principle. It's vicarious liability. It's extending the criminal liability umbrella, to include things that you didn't even do.
Yeah.
And that's what she's proposing, it sounds like. It's a very slippery slope, because it can get from, oh, well, that's marijuana or drugs or this or that. And then it's, well, you said the wrong thing.
Right.
It's speech. It's, and that's the direction we seem to be going in.
Yeah. So this matters. What happened to Ross matters for a lot
Sets a precedent
of legal and philosophical reasons as we move forward, because technology is ubiquitous, and the ability of people to curate and choose and do whatever they want that's the new normal. And clearly incumbents, particularly government incumbents, don't much like that, because it's about control. But so he built this site, and he I assume he has since acknowledged that he's the guy that built it.
Yeah, he had help building it because he's not a computer programmer.
Okay.
And that came out in trial. But he created it. He had the idea for it.
So he was the thinker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The philosopher. And it's even, the judge even said at sentencing, we know you created this site for philosophical reasons. We're just not sure it's a philosophy you've left behind. So I'm like, oh, so because he might still have this dangerous philosophy of voluntary interaction, he has to die in prison?
That's interesting.
She said it. It's in the sentencing transcripts. To me, that's a First Amendment problem.
Yeah.
We should not be caged for our philosophy or our political views. She found them troubling and dangerous, and cited it. So
he built this site, and the almost immediately the federal government started this massive operation to try to figure out who it was and to take it down. There's actually a movie about this, right?
Right. Well, Deep Web.
Yeah.
They go into that. Yeah.
And so what happened? He was arrested, and he was charged with what?
Well, he was sentenced for less than he was charged with. So I don't know. Might as well just talk about what he was sentenced for, because that's
Sure.
what matters.
Sure.
And by the way, I just want to say that all his charges and his sentencing was non-violent. And he was smeared with allegations of murder for hire. But then when it came time to indict him and take it to trial, it wasn't there.
Yeah.
But the media had already talked about it. There was another indictment that mentioned those things. It's been dismissed with prejudice. So there are no charges of murder for hire, and yet this is a lingering thing.
It's out there in the narrative.
It's out there, with the media. And I have been told by criminal justice lawyers, people who have had this happen to them, that this is something that is done to people.
Mm-hmm.
That they're charged with things they didn't do but are heinous, and then gets dropped or goes away, but it's part of the narrative.
Yeah, it's a prosecutor's strategy.
Exactly.
And probably leaked to the press, and the press, of course, likes the most salacious thing.
Exactly.
And that's why I want to bring that up, because if I talk to a casual friend about Ross, they're like, that guy, did he try to kill somebody?
Yeah.
And it's all a lie.
Yeah.
And dismissed with prejudice means that no one can ever charge him with that ever again.
Right.
Yeah.
And they didn't need to do that, but they did.
Yeah.
It's done. It's over. But
what was he
in prison?
What was he?
But what he was
of?
convicted for, and it's a conspiracy, essentially conspiracy. So not that he sold drugs, not that he exchanged drugs with anyone. It's that he was in a conspiracy to do that because people on the site bought and sold drugs.
Yeah.
And that's also hacking. Computer hacking, same thing. Not that he did it, but that there was software on the site that could be used for that. No hacking was ever proven. Money laundering, same thing. That I think it was mainly Bitcoin was exchanged for fiat money or for gold or whatever. Not that he did it. Again, it's conspiracy. And then fake IDs. The one thing that was not same thing. The one thing that was not a conspiracy was, and this was towards the end. At first, those were the only charges, and which come with a 10-year mandatory minimum. Then they added the kingpin charge, basically saying that a website host is analogous to El Chapo, Pablo Escobar, and these violent kingpins. That's what that law is for, the continuing criminal enterprise. That comes with its own life sentence, and that comes with a 20-year mandatory minimum. And so they loaded that on there, so he has a double life sentence, and then 40 years for all those other charges.
Yeah.
Conspiracy charges.
So, I mean, it's inconceivable. 2 life sentences, 40 years.
Yeah.
Compare that. I saw you speak at PorcFest recently, and you were comparing it to some comparable sentences for other murderous drug kingpins.
Oh, well, murderous drug kingpins, yes. Like many of them, 25 years and less. El Chapo recently got half the sentence Ross did.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, how is that possible?
But also people in the Silk Road, the other defendants in the Silk Road case, the person convicted for being the biggest drug seller, who actually sold drugs, which Ross did not, got 10 years. He is the same offense level as Ross. He got 10 years, and it goes down from there. There was a copycat site called Silk Road 2 that the government said was identical, except it was bigger. It sold more drugs, and the person who was running that, Blake Benthal, was in custody for 13 days and let out. And Vice just broke the story that he has to pay back taxes on 2 years. That's it. So the disparity of sentencing alone is a violation of the sentencing. I believe it's the Sentencing Reform Act.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked up the 8th Amendment to the Constitution, and I'll pull it up, and I want to read it to people because I think actually understanding the consequences of what the government did. But while I pull that up, talk about some of there was some incredibly dishonest, corrupt members of law enforcement that were the leads on this case, and tell some of those stories about what they were up to.
Yeah, well, we know about 2 of them because they're in prison now. One is Karl Mark Force, who was a DEA agent at the core of the investigation. And the other was Sean Bridges, who was a Secret Service agent, also on assignment from the NSA. And they had a back door into Silk Road. and use that access to steal money. We know that was true from different people who had legal goods on there too. People, they stole money, but at the same time, they had the ability, and we don't have proof, but they had the ability they had passwords, they had PIN numbers, they had keys, basically keys to the kingdom, and they could act as DPR, which is the moniker for the lead administrator, without DPR even knowing, and other aliases. They could change any content in the chats, marketplace, any of that, and this was used as evidence against Ross at trial, and they've been proven to be corrupt. They're in prison now.
Was that and that information was not available to the jury? Is that right?
That's correct.
That's insane.
That's insane.
Yeah.
The defense objected at a pretrial hearing that was sealed. I mean, closed off. We couldn't go to it, but the prosecution argued. They said, "Well, no, you can't bring this up because we're still investigating these people, and this will tip them off." And then we found out later they already knew.
Yeah.
They had known for almost a year. They were interviewed by law enforcement, and the defense said, "Okay, well, wait. Go ahead and do your investigation. Then we'll have a full, fair trial." And the judge said, "No, you have to do it now, and you cannot mention them. They're totally precluded." So the jury had no idea that there were corrupt agents all over that site.
Yeah. So to repeat this, because it's so shocking, it's hard to imagine. DEA agents had gotten into Silk Road.
Yeah, as part of their investigation.
They were stealing money.
Yep.
In the form of Bitcoin. A lot of money. How
20,000 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Is what I've been.
Which is that's real cash.
Yeah. Especially now. It wasn't worth that much then, but it's still a lot of money.
And that information wasn't available to the jury that convicted your son.
Correct.
Wow.
They didn't know of their existence. And actually, the prosecution hid the existence of Sean Bridges, the Secret Service agent, even from the judge.
Yeah.
That all came out 2 months after trial.
Yeah.
Some other interesting things came out too, but I don't know if you want to get to that right
now.
But,
sure.
Okay, so what happens is certainly in this case, the government did a huge data dump. So there was something like 4 terabytes of material to go through to find the needles in the haystack that would be helpful. Well, this is practically impossible. This is like you would be crushed to death if it was on paper. It's just a huge amount of data. But after trial, they kept sifting through and discovered, first of all, that DPR, which, just to digress 1 second, is DPR stands for Dread Pirate Roberts, who was a character in The Princess Bride, and the whole point of Dread Pirate Roberts was to pass on the title to, and that person would pass it on, that person would pass it on. So it's even within the name, it's implied that there are many of them.
Okay.
But it's pretty obvious when Ross was in solitary confinement that DPR logged into the Silk Road Forum.
Yeah.
And that was discovered after trial. I mean, and there were other indications, and it's on our website, all the different anecdotal evidence as well as hard evidence that there was more than one person running the site.
So there's more going on here than we can get into, but
real quick, let me say one other thing.
Sure.
There was also tampering discovered. So the suspicion is it was from a third corrupt agent. So there was big portions of what the jury saw was incomplete, and big portions of that evidence, which was discovered later, was deleted.
Yeah.
So it painted a different picture.
You referenced the website, and there's more information than people might be able to consume. And
there's a lot.
If you're interested, you should go to freeross.org. And there's a petition that we're going to talk about, but let's talk about it several times.
Okay.
There's a petition on change.org to ask President Trump to grant clemency.
Yes.
Which is different than
a pardon.
A pardon.
Yeah, we're not asking for a pardon.
Yeah.
Ross, admits that he made a very grievous mistake. He's not saying, "Oh, I did nothing wrong, pardon me." But we are asking, and he is asking, for a sentence that is not cruel, unusual, really brutal, and barbaric.
Yeah.
That is so far beyond, out of whack with the offense and what's necessary.
Yeah.
And we're asking for a commutation.
Okay. Let's talk about Ross and and what's going on in prison. I just heard some of these stories, and they're pretty rough as well, because I want to define what cruel and unusual punishment is. So give people a picture for what Ross is going through and what he started. Like it started rough and only recently got a little bit better.
Yeah, it actually started in a more transitional facility in New York. So that's more of a mix of people. But then he was sent to a maximum security penitentiary. And that was very gang heavy with violent people.
Killers and
violent gangs.
Rapists and...
Yeah. I mean, it's the one step down from the Supermax.
Yeah.
And there's other people, nonviolent people in there too, but it's very violent. There were routinely stabbings, beatings. There have been riots there. Just recently, there were 2 different suicides of people Ross knew.
Yeah.
Because it's so tough. No, it's very dangerous. And the only reason he was in a place like that was because of his sentence, because his security score, he has no violence.
Yeah.
He would have been in a camp.
Yeah.
He had such a low security score. Even when he came in, they were going, "What are you doing in here?"
What is a security score?
What is it? I believe it's a 12. It might be a 10, but it's low.
No, I mean, like, explain.
Oh, what is it?
Explain
Sorry.
I'm guessing what it is, but explain to everybody what a security score is.
Well, it's a score that each inmate, each prisoner gets to show how dangerous they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we're talking about, like, and I've read some of the letters, all of his friends, everyone tells the same story. He's a Boy Scout.
Yeah, he was an Eagle Scout.
He's a peacenik Boy Scout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Idealist, geek. I mean, believe me, I know you know this, but I mean, he could be sitting here, you'd be having a great conversation, you would not be afraid at all.
Right.
There's no, he's not a danger to anyone.
Yeah.
The guards have come up to me and gone, he doesn't belong in here.
Yeah.
What's he doing in here?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So, and that's been many times.
But he has spent months in, I don't know if the right word is solitary confinement, but small metal boxes.
Yeah. Now
How did
he
that
has been
happen?
in actual solitary for probably at least a couple months.
Yeah.
But also what happened was he refused to participate in an assault on another inmate because he's not a violent guy. And he had to put himself in protective custody because that made him a target.
Yeah.
And so protective custody was an 8x10 metal box. No, just no window, nothing, for 3.5 months.
That's
3.5 months.
That's not done, even though it is, but it's not done to punish him. It's
no, but it's
ostensibly
exactly
to
the
protect
same
him.
thing they do to punish people. It's the place they put you, and people who are being punished go there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to do a second show on prison reform, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
So it seems like a good time to read. I'm not going to read the Eighth Amendment, but the Eighth Amendment, amongst other things, prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. And I went on Wiki and I found a 72 Supreme Court case where Justice Brennan and the Supreme Court set the standard that a punishment would be cruel and unusual if it was too severe for the crime, if it was arbitrary, if it offended society's sense of justice, or if it was not more effective than a less severe penalty.
Wow.
So if that's the standard,
There
I
it
is.
is.
Like we just checked all the boxes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is why you're here. This is the point of the petition. Too few people know the story.
Especially the true story.
Because of the narrative that I don't know if they're the prosecutors, but the government created against Ross. So tell me about the petition drive, because we're trying to get the president's attention.
Yes.
And we're trying to get everybody's attention for something that most people, maybe they haven't heard about this.
Yeah, thanks. And the thing is, President Trump has shown that he is interested in redemption, in giving people second chances, that he believes in that, and mercy. And so I'm very hopeful that he can see in this case that Ross is a perfect candidate for clemency, because he will never reoffend. He will never hurt anyone. It's not like the kind of situation where a president lets someone out and they do. That's, this is not going to happen with him.
Yeah.
And so we have a petition. You can go to freeross.org/petition, or just on our website. There's a banner. And it has over 206,000 signatures, and it's only been a little over a year. And it's just asking for a commutation, saying this sentence needs to be corrected because it's very, very wrong. And it's the second fastest growing clemency petition on that change.org.
Okay. And repeat the URL so people can go there?
Sure. freeross.org/petition.
Okay. And after we're done with this, we're gonna shoot a couple short clips and try to drive some traffic to the petition site. And
that'd be great.
See if we can't get people fired up about. But I want to go back and sort of like take this a little bit above just your fight as Ross's mother and tease out some of the public policy implications of this. And one of them, and it's we had maybe you know Dr. Jeff Singer, Cato scholar. He's a practicing physician, and he's rabidly anti-drug war. And he approaches it as a physician as opposed to just a libertarian policy guy. And one of the things this website was trying to do was to create better information. You know, we're in the middle of an opioid crisis, and I would argue that the crisis was very much created by the drug war itself, by prohibiting certain kinds of legal behavior, by clamping down on prescriptions. You're pushing people into the black market where they don't know.
Right.
Prince, and as Dr. Singer talked about this, Prince died because he didn't know. And he wasn't legally allowed to do what he was doing, so he went to the black market. He bought something he didn't know what it was,
and he couldn't get advice. He couldn't get proper advice for some alternatives.
So one of the dreams of this website, and it was functioning, was consumer feedback and advice on what potentially deadly and dangerous drugs might do to you.
Right, there was, and how to get off drugs. You know, there was a book club. There was all kinds of philosophical discussions. It wasn't, not too many kingpins have a book club, or care about voluntary interaction. Again, I think it was naive. I think it was overly idealistic.
Sure.
But that's true of a lot of young people.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was the intentions were good.
Yeah. And of course, as libertarians, we think that the drug war is illegitimate, and I don't think that we should be in the business of putting people in cages for choices that don't hurt other people or take their stuff.
Exactly.
Now, conservatives may not agree with that, but there's other fundamental issues at play here.
Right. I'd like to just make a quick call out to conservatives, because. And I was very much a conservative. I've become much more libertarian.
I met you at a conservative conference
we met at a
long time ago.
Right. It was 6 years ago, I think. So what I would like to say is the drug war doesn't work. People are still doing drugs after over 45 years, and I believe could it possibly be $1 trillion? It's many billions.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work. And so why would we keep doing it? Well, I think the government keeps doing it because people are making tons of money and shredding our Constitution.
Yeah.
I mean, there's many drug cases that who cares about the Constitution? It's drugs.
Yeah.
So this is really a conservative issue.
Yeah.
It's not just a wild hair, libertarian thing. It's definitely something that's hurting our Constitution. It is unconstitutional.
Yeah.
It's not in the Constitution. Prohibition was, a big failure. It's a failure now. And it's costing tons of money to the taxpayer.
And that is shifting in the conservative community. The president himself has certainly been very clear about legalizing medical cannabis on the campaign trail. I believe he was broadly pro legalizing cannabis. And you have guys like Glenn Beck, my colleague and media mentor here at Blaze TV. He takes my position that all drugs should be legalized, in part because you can't regulate away dumb decisions, would be his conservative argument. But in the process of trying to, you can create a lot of death and destruction along the way.
Correct.
So that's one issue. But the other issues that I think might be even more concerning to constitutional conservatives and libertarians alike are sort of the indiscriminate prosecutorial discretion just to get the guy, right? The way they gamed the system and broke the rules and apparently stealing and all sorts of stuff. Our justice system's not going to work if we allow that sort of thing to happen.
Right. Well, yeah. And it's obvious this is going on because 98% of people plea and don't go to trial. There's a trial penalty. Now, trials are right. It's a pillar of our justice system, but fair trials practically don't exist. And 98% of people plea because they're bullied or threatened by prosecutors that if you go to trial, you're going to have a worse consequence. And so many people plea to things they're innocent of.
Yeah.
And I've been told by former prosecutors, they have told me, said they will lie, they will cheat, anything to get that notch in their belt, get that trophy, and there are no consequences. And there are many, many examples of it. In Ross's case, there was a very controlled narrative. It wasn't allowed to be mentioned that he was a libertarian. It wasn't allowed to be mentioned that there were many, many legal items on the site. Many things were not allowed to be mentioned. It was tailored to the prosecutor's narrative and what was presented to the jury.
Which gets us to the broader question, and there's sort of an emerging consensus on the right and the left. I mean, it's kind of a libertarian consensus that we put too many nonviolent kids in cages, and the cost of that. First of all, the fiscal cost, like it's bankrupting states because every time we pass a new mandatory minimum law, we build more prisons. And it's a wildly expensive thing, but you also get this cycle of recidivism where young people go into the sort of environment you're describing your son is in, and what's one of the first things he had to decide if he wanted to do, which is to become a thug.
Yeah, he had
become
to
a
resist
violent,
that.
yeah.
But a lot of people, look, I've relocated. We have moved to be near him, to give him a lifeline. But most people can't do that. We have an internet business. We can do that. And because I think it's so important. But when it becomes your world and you're trying to survive, they say it's correctional. No, it's a criminal training ground.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are bullied or pressured into joining a gang, which they never would have done. Right. And things like that. There's a huge cost in that way.
Yeah. And it just creates that endless cycle where once a criminal, always a criminal. There's no way to get out of it.
And the other thing is the children, because, I've gotten to know the families and I go in there and it's just, oh my gosh, it's so horrible because they're so excited to see their father. And then when they're leaving, these children are shattered. They are sobbing. They are harmed. These kids are being hurt. And these are excessive sentences, and often nonviolent people. And one woman said to me, she goes, before this happened, my kids were getting straight A's, and now everything's just falling apart. So, and these kids statistically have been proven that they will end up in the system. Yeah. So it becomes like, it's like a mass incarceration has become this monster. I mean, the prison population has metastasized 800% since the drug war. 800%. Life sentences have quintupled since the drug war. It's become this isn't even American. Yeah. Which is another argument for the conservatives. It's like before this, you didn't automatically get, first of all, hardly anybody got life. But you didn't automatically go to prison. There were many other options. It wasn't like this. And it was a steady population. And it shot up, like I say, 800%. We're the biggest incarcerator in the world. This isn't good. This is wrong. Yeah. It's evil.
Yeah, you have, and of course, President Trump, efforts were attempted at the federal level to do some fairly nominal reforms to the criminal justice system, and there's a whole lot more to do. But President Trump has sort of made it safe for conservatives to admit that this system is broken. But it's also just a fascinating thing where Van Jones and Donald Trump can agree on something. Right. So something's wrong if these very different guys come together on something. Another issue for me, and this used to be sort of a fringy libertarian thing, but now it's become quite urgent. Well, I shouldn't say I'm talking about free speech. And now it seems like a fringy libertarian thing because you have a lot of people, including the Mark Zuckerberg suggested that Facebook be regulated for speech, pointing to the French system, which is incredibly authoritarian, and by the way, very un-American. The idea that somebody in the government, some regulatory agency, is going to decide you can say this, but you can't say that. Yes. And we sort of take our freedom to say whatever the heck is on our mind for granted. But I'm looking at what's happening in Hong Kong right now, and the activists who are risking their lives to fight for that civil liberty of actually speaking your mind. They need privacy so that the government doesn't come after them. And that's what this is all about. This is about voluntary behavior that's happening under a veil of privacy so that whoever can't mess with you. Yeah. And I feel like that's another issue that hopefully conservatives, libertarians, civil libertarians on the left, like we all used to agree on this thing.
Yeah, well, we better. Yeah. Because we're going to lose it, I think. And, Ross has told me that one of his motivations was he felt like something had to be, people needed to understand that we were losing our privacy and how important that was. That was a big motivation for him. But yeah, I mean, like I told you, the judge used his philosophy to justify her draconian sentence.
Yeah.
This is dangerous. Yeah.
Let's get back to that, because that, and I heard you make this argument, and we just compared Ross's sentence to El Chapo.
Right.
And if they're both drug kingpins, you would think they would deserve the same sentence at very least. He, of course, is a well-documented murderer. I don't know what the body count is, but it's something fantastic. And the government itself has acknowledged that Ross was absolutely not responsible for anybody's murder.
That's correct.
But you argue, and you always thought that they're trying to make an example in the context of the drug war, but now you think it's something else.
Well, they said they were doing that. They said, we're going to make you an example and deter others, which of course didn't work. But I actually think it was about the Bitcoin. But Bitcoin has to do with privacy as well. And I think that because the other sentences are so disparate. The biggest drug seller got 10 years. So obviously they weren't that concerned about drugs.
Yeah.
But it came out about a little over a year ago, and The Intercept broke the story that Snowden documents show that the NSA was urgently pursuing Bitcoin users a few months before Silk Road was taken down. I thought they were supposed to be going after terrorists.
Yeah.
They were urgently worried about Bitcoin. And I think that was a big part of why they came down so hard on Ross. Now the genie's out of the bottle. Bitcoin's out there. But, and that's why he's such a hero to the blockchain communities, because it was the first proof of use of Bitcoin. It showed it could be used as money. It put it on the map.
Yeah.
And I think this was a big problem for financial powers.
Yeah. It sounds something like the Chinese government would do, not ours, but obviously financial privacy and privacy general, and the sort of democratization that's happening because of technology. This is a fundamental threat to people that would want to control our lives.
Right, because they use money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another one. I think we could all agree that financial privacy is not just a good thing, but an essential thing.
Yeah, to freedom. Yeah,
to freedom and sort of the American way of doing things. Yeah. So there's lots of reasons to care about this fight, and I've seen you give talks on you've talked a lot about criminal justice reform. Yeah. Very, very powerful perspective from seeing it in the inside. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of work to do.
We do. It's really become a bigger cause for me and Ross. We're hoping that the high-profile nature of his case will shine a light. Because it's not just Ross. He's not unique. He has an excessively extreme situation. But, there was a guy that he was in prison with, Tony, who's doing life for marijuana in Colorado. But it's federal.
That's so absurd, yeah.
It's terrible. It's just, it's just no violence.
Yeah.
And on and on and on. So it's really needs to be corrected. It is un-American. It does not, it's really antithetical to our basic values.
Yeah.
It needs to change.
So tell us again what we can do to help free Ross.
Thank you. Of course, sign the petition, because the more signatures we have, I think the more convincing it will be to say this is important to a lot of people. And my goal is 500,000. I think we can do it. Please go to freeross.org. It doesn't, or freeross.org/petition. It does not take a minute. It's very quick. It would really help. And please spread the word about it. And if anyone has any political connections at any level, please get in touch with me. You can do it through the website, freeross.org. Every footer has a way to contact me. And I'd really appreciate it. We're just a family with a few friends helping. We're not a big organization. We don't have a ton of money, which is another thing we need. But
so there's
a way to donate.
Yeah, talk about that. Like you're burning through legal bills like
lawyers
no
are so
tomorrow.
expensive. I knew they were expensive. I didn't realize how expensive. Very, very expensive. So any donations are very welcome. Many people are very wealthy because of Ross's vision about Bitcoin. And, how about, helping us out? Some of
those guys are watching.
Yeah, well,
I know we got a big Bitcoin crowd.
Yeah, and it's just like, hey, help him. He's fighting for his life in a to get out of a cage, and it'd be so much better if he could be out with society. He has a lot to contribute, and so if you've made a lot of money on Bitcoin, I'd be really grateful if you'd help me out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people have, to be fair, but a lot of people have. That's how we've gotten as far as we are. But it's a constant thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And we won't name names, but you're here in Washington D.C. and you've been meeting with folks on Capitol Hill.
Yeah.
And you're getting some traction.
Yeah, we've had some good response. I think most people, when they realize this sentence and that it's for a nonviolent first-time offender, young, are like, what?
Yeah.
And that's really all you need to know to sign the petition.
Yeah.
It doesn't get all the details of all the stuff. It's like, no, this sentence sets a terrible precedent for excessive sentencing in this country, which is out of control.
So political leaders, media leaders, influencers, somebody's got to get to Kim Kardashian because she knows how to get this kind of stuff done.
Yeah. Any help, I really welcome.
Does anyone know Kim? No? We'll work on that part.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thanks for telling this story. I know you do this quite a bit, and it can't be a fun story to tell, but
I appreciate the opportunity. No, I really do, and it's been fun to talk to you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lyn.
Thanks.
Thanks for watching Kibbe on Liberty. By now, you know this is the most important event of your week, so make sure you subscribe on YouTube. Click the little bell so you get notifications. Kibbe on Liberty, mostly honest conversations with mostly interesting people.